National Football Show. Appreciate y'all coming aboard. Thank you so much for stepping in. Philly 500 will be with us, our boy at bottom of the hour. We'll get his thoughts on Hopkins. Also, some topics that we have. Want to get his opinion on it as we get ready for Memorial Day weekend. You know, the Cowboys are in OTAs right now. And I don't know how the Cowboys have circled around to where now all of a sudden Kellen Moore was some sort of bad guy or scapegoat when they were scoring 40 points a game, leading the NFL in total yardage, and Dak was putting up a shitload of numbers, and they were doing so well. That when was the play calling ever an issue in Dallas? I don't ever remember anyone going play calling was an issue. It was Dak throwing ill-advised picks. When did that become a topic all of a sudden? And we're also going to do this now. Mike McCarthy now, we're going to find out who he is. We're going to find out if Mike McCarthy's a good coach or not. For 13 years, he had Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Now we're going to know, is this guy a really good coach or not? So now we're going to get a true answer on Mike McCarthy. Is Mike McCarthy in the conversation with Sean Payton? They pretty much have the same record. Or has he just been the beneficiary of having Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers? I think it's the latter. Until he proves otherwise, I mean, has he shown you? Now, then again, he wasn't the play caller. It was Kellen Moore. But I don't ever remember the Cowboy problems being play calling. That's kind of like a manufactured scapegoat deal. All of a sudden now, well, you know, Dallas is really going to, hey, oh my God, you know, having Mike McCarthy in my ear, it's really great. And you're like, okay, well, I don't ever remember anyone really overly bitching about Kellen Moore's play calling. You know what I mean? So it's just like the Cowboys coming up with these manufactured reasons why they think they've upgraded something. I do think they've had a good offseason. But again, here's a question mark on, I say that there's a bigger question mark on Mike McCarthy than there is even almost on Nick Sirianni. By the way, I've got my top 32 NFL head coaches. I saw Russ Tucker. I saw that he ranks them. I want to do that. And I think he's nuts on Sirianni. Okay, and where he had him ranked. He's not a top 5 coach. That's just because, again, here's a guy in Ross Tucker who works for the Eagles. Hey, I guess working for somebody gives you some latitude to kind of give you a bullshit list. That's no reason to put a coach like Nick Sirianni ahead of somebody like even Sean McVay. Sean McVay is a hell of a play calling coach. I wouldn't call Nick Sirianni a great coach. You know what I call Nick Sirianni? A great babysitter. So it just shows you. I saw that. I'm like, come on, man. Just because you work for the Eagles, don't turn it into a charade. Okay? Fly, he does preseason games for the Eagles. And he goes on IP. If you go on IP as an analyst, you're not talking shit on the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay? You're not. The DeAndre Hopkins story, I love it. Miracle One had to happen, and it did. Okay? And it did. Now we see what he does. All right. I wrote down a comment that I heard Jason Kelce make, and this is about Jalen Carter. Pretty tough to sit here and make an assessment on a football player because you've seen him in limited action. And quite frankly, we really haven't seen him in gear yet. You've only seen him in helmets and shorts. So Jason Kelce is kind of giving you the frosting on top of the cake when it comes to Jalen Carter. And he was asked a question about him. And he was asked to kind of compare on what he sees with Jalen Carter And he threw a name out, and I was pretty shocked, and I was impressed. Let me say something to you. When a guy like Jason Kelce throws a compliment out, or somebody puts something out there like him, he's not just going to do it for shits and giggles. He's going to be very cognizant of the people that he's played against and respectful of the people that he's played against in the past. So he's not just going to be like an analyst like me or anyone else or like Ross to go out there and just do something for oneself purpose. It's not going to happen. He's going to be very respectful of the people that he has played against or currently playing against. So he's going to be there with this. He said, if I had to make a comparison, and I'm paraphrasing here, it would be to somebody like the guy in Washington, Daron Payne. I almost swallowed my tongue. You're comparing Jalen Carter in how he moves preliminary-wise to Daron Payne? Holy shit, Eagles got a superstar. There is no question. With that kind of, and by the way, a guy like that, he has the eyeball test. A guy like Kelce who has seen everything in front of him and gone through tons of camps and OTAs, he's a guy that could spot a guy who's going to make it and a guy who's not going to make it probably in about 30 plays. And he'll know. And so far on the preliminary, Daron Payne, okay? Somebody like that. I mean, dude, Jalen Carter's going to be the best defensive lineman by the end of the season that the Eagles have. I have no doubt about that. He's going to be your best defensive football player. Okay? He's going to be your best football player. And I'm just, hey. And then he started saying, you see a little bit of the fact in how he can move his hips like Jonathan Allen. These are all massive compliments of bona fide star football players. Likes the way he moves his hips, likes the way he goes. The question mark will be hands. And that's a great comment by him because the hands are so important on getting those guys off. The number one thing that great offensive lineman, and I'll tell you exactly what makes Jason Kelce so great. What makes Kelce so great is his ability to be patient with his hands. He'll give you false punches. He'll punch you, jump on you quick. He plays that cat-mouse game with you out there with his hands because he's so good at it. The key component when you're a defensive lineman, don't let those guys get their hands on you because once an offensive lineman gets his hands on you, you're finished. Watch Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is constantly hand slapping, constantly doing this, constantly turning and constantly working the points, keeping those hands off. Because when you keep your hands off him and you keep that guy's hands off you, what a lot of young guys do, and this is what Jordan Davis did a lot. Jordan was working his hands, but you know what he would do? He would stop working his feet. You can't work your hands and stop your feet because you're blocked. Because then all the offensive lineman has to do, you're just working your hands, you're in front of them, you're blocked. What Donald does that's so great, and all the great three techniques, and what they do, they're working their feet, getting up the field and getting depth, but slapping hands, keeping those hands. What happens when you get people's hands off you? Then you're working points. This is what Mulata struggles on is the second move. And the second move is getting back in position to get that hand out, because you know what happens to Jordan Mailata sometimes? He'll get beat on the second move on his shoulder and his outside shoulder. And then he gets so overprotective of that, guy will come inside on him. And he's worked. I think his injury played a factor in that last year a lot. Okay? But Kelce's patient. Kelce's patient. That's a great compliment. That's an absolutely fabulous compliment that he gave the kid. He's talking about people that know how to use their hands and play the position. Look, let me say this to you. Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox. Okay, Fletcher Cox is maybe the most underrated defensive lineman the Philadelphia Eagles have ever had. He is the most underrated. I'm telling you, he's a borderline Canton man. Like, he could get in. Watch this. Hey, Yale, Bryant Young. You know, Bryant Young just went into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I don't think Bryant Young's better than Fletcher Cox. I thought about somebody who just went in recently. I don't think Bryant Young, I think Bryant Young was a fine ball player. He came back from a catastrophic leg injury. I think he was a fine ball player. But I do not believe that Bryant Young was a better football player than Fletcher Cox. I do not. You tell me, who would you draft? I would draft Fletcher Cox more. He's bigger. He's stronger. He's faster. He takes up more space in the middle. Okay? To me, Niners all day goes, Sills is a Fletcher Cox fan. I have always been. He's just older. Now I'm a fan. I've always been a fan. Callie Green goes, Sills. DJ Fluker, he was an absolute train wreck with the Chargers. I covered him. Thought he was a train wreck. Fat, out of shape, lazy. That's why he never lived up to the billing. But the problem that you have here is that with that take, if Jeff Stoutland okayed him to be worked out, it's Jeff Stoutland. Could Stoutland like sand off the bad habits that he has? Probably. Okay? That's exactly right, JM. Seals became a Cox fan when he compared him to Sue's stats. I didn't know he was that close. I didn't think that both players were that close in sacks, 71-70. I would have swore to you that Sue was a better ball player. That's not the case. Sue was probably a better ball player earlier on in Detroit in his first 5 years. Okay? But I think Fletcher has kind of evened the game out a bit. Hey, there's a shot that Fletcher Cox, hey, can somebody look this up? I think Warren Sapp has 90. I think Sapp has 96 sacks. Fletcher's at 70. So in the next 3 years, he gets 18 sacks and he ends up with 88 as an interior D lineman. And he played on one team and has one Super Bowl now and 2 NFC championship rings. Man, it's a great resume. Sapp has 96.5. Now, Sapp is the defensive player of the year, and he's a better football player. He's not quite as big, but he's a better football player. But you're talking about one of the top 3 techniques in the history of the league. Personally, Sapp, to me, is a better football player than Aaron Donald because he played the run. Sapp was on that great Bucs defense that gave up no yardage on the run and got after people. Simeon Rice was on that team. Chidi Ahanatu, Derek Brooks, John Lynch, Barber, all them guys were on that team. They had a really great football team. And that was a really great defensive unit. And Monty Kiffin was a D coordinator. And Tony put the whole defense together. No comment, M. Reyes. No comment. I can't do Kane on Kane. Personally, though, Jerome was better than Sapp. Jerome was better than Sapp. He was a better ball player. Jerome had quicker feet, I thought. And he was a bigger dude than Warren. Warren's a 310-pounder, but Jerome went around 318, 320. And Jerome could run a 4.8. And Jerome had great wiggle hips and could get around the horn quicker. He was good at that. And he was better than Cortez. Cortez was a great ball player. Sapp was better than John Randall. Aaron Donald plays like Sapp. The only difference is, though, 215, Aaron Donald doesn't really care about playing the run. Now, that's today's NFL, so that's not so much on him. You know, Russell Maryland was a good ball player, but, you know, JM, I never thought an exceptional ball player. I thought he was solid. I know he was the number 1 overall pick. I get it. I never got that. But, okay, I mean, I thought Russell was a really good player. I just never really looked at him as a guy where maybe I'm jaded because I never really saw. I mean, I taught him everything. So, and I taught the coach that coached him. Jerome and I taught Butch, and Butch taught him. So I don't know. It just, maybe it's because of that I'm a little jaded. Because, you know, the things that I saw him do in football games, I thought he was a really good player. I thought he was a really good football player. Won 3 national titles in college and won 3 Super Bowl rings. I don't know how you get any better than that. Richard Seymour is a better player than Vince Wilfork. Kid from Georgia is a better player. I think Vince was a great defensive tackle. By the way, that's another good one. Richard Seymour and Fletcher Cox. Seymour is more versatile. If I had to pick, Sills, who would you want on your team in your D-line? Richard Seymour or Fletcher Cox in their primes? Whew, that's a good one, man. Probably Fletcher by a nose. Probably Fletcher Cox by a nose. Now, again, Richard Seymour could play in a 34 and 43 and a 50 front. So he had more versatility to him. I don't think you can line Fletcher in a 7 and line him up at an outside end to set the edge. I don't think he has that skill to do that. Seymour can do that. Seymour's a pretty good athlete. I think he's a better athlete than Fletcher. Fletcher's a better defensive tackle, though. He's a better DT. I'd say Fletcher. And plus he gets sacks in his prime, and he got penetration, and he was able to get back into the secondary. Or back into the backfield. Would Seymour thrive in this big rules era? Yeah, because the rules don't really apply to the D tackles. They apply more to linebackers and corners and safeties. Undefenseless wide receivers, the pick plays now, all that shit. Now, back then they didn't call that stuff. Today they call all that shit. And defense is the only thing that they can, because a lot of people, what they like to do is run that. That's what, if you notice, that's why they've moved the referee from the middle of the field to the back end, further back, because a lot of offensive coordinators are using that referee as a pick play. And now they call that play. Having that ref in the middle of the field, shit, man. Bill Walsh used to run that play with Jerry Rice all the time. He'd run right in front of the referee. And that DB would have to not hit him because he'd use him as kind of like the goalpost. Cox isn't making the Hall of Fame? Probably. Okay, but again, Richard Seymour makes it, and so does Bryant Young. I don't think those guys are any better than him. Those guys aren't any better. Okay? Michael says, Sills, why didn't you not become a scout? I was offered a job with the Raiders. And the Browns. Raiders and Browns. What was the other team? College team. North Carolina as a scout or a recruiter for Butch. And I don't know. I'm probably stupid and I didn't. Because you don't really have to be a good coach nowadays. Look at Jonathan Gannon. How that guy. Hey, by the way, Jonathan Gannon, he loses D-Hop now. Hey, you don't think Buda Baker's next, do you? Yeah. Buda Baker's got to be going, I'm next. They're going to cut his ass too. Maybe they cut D-Hop to keep him. That's probably what they did. Rob Peter to pay Paul. That's kind of probably what they did here. So that they could keep Buda Baker, they fired DeAndre Hopkins because he's younger. So, let me ask you this. So, if you're Kyler Murray, are you happy today or are you sad? Kyler Murray's got to be going, who are my wideouts again? So, you just jettison DeAndre Hopkins. Who am I throwing the ball to? Dude. And Hollywood Brown and Zach Ertz. Holy shit. Man. Dude, I'm sorry. Zach Ertz and Hollywood Brown is not going to move. I think the Arizona Cardinals, dog. I think I got to remember to bring that up with my boy Philly 500 with Jonathan Gannon and Howie. I got to remind myself to do that. Hollywood Brown and Zach Ertz. Man, if you're Kyler Murray, you're going to have a lot more puss faces on the sidelines there, ain't you?